So I'm going to just talk for just a minute. My name is Jennifer Wells, and I'm a faculty here in the Transformative Studies Department for the last 17 years at this remarkable university, California Institute of Integral Studies. And if more people come in, Breven, if you see it, you can let them in too. But I'm just going to give a real quick intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to our speaker. I'm very excited for this event. So Breven has been 20 years in the indie film industry, doing what she says is impossible, finding funding and also championing the independent filmmakers that the algorithms miss. And she's been very engaged serving on film programming teams and juries and holding roles at all the major indie film outlets such as Sundance Film Independent, RE Fest, and Outfest. And so really working at that juncture between all this emerging talent and the industry that funds it. And so she's going to talk a little bit about the inquiry that she's looking into and exploring and the dissertation proposal that she's finalizing around finance for independent film. And I think we really have a treat to have such a interesting, in-depth front row seat to what's going on behind the scenes. I know a lot of us, to speak for myself, really care a lot about this industry. It's been more my film of choice in my life. And there's a lot of big changes going on with respect to finance. The one thing that I've picked up on and looking at how people are talking about it is that it seems like there's agreement around the shift from really big funders to more small funders. And it's kind of funny when people talk about it. It seems that those critics or people involved in the industry who are maybe more pessimistic will talk about financial fragmentation, and the more optimistic will talk about diversification, which to me sounds a little more positive. But they're all talking about finance models shifting from involving really large financiers to a panoply of more smaller ones. Um, and, a lot of things are really changing a lot. And one of the things that kind of makes me smile is when we think about debates and ways of looking at things that we've been arguing about or debating about for a long time. And the big shifts, the tremendous shifts going on with media and film now, such that, as one critic or voice on this said, we get past the most tiresome argument that there's been. What does independent even mean? Is there such a thing as independent film? Because, as they say, the joke's on us. After decades of trying to pin the butterfly, we're surrounded by hundreds of species. There's such an incredible diversity of film. And so it's a very exciting topic and time for film and the future of film. And so with that, I'll turn it to Breven Warren.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful to be here. And I also want to say thank you to some of my cohort that I see in this room. So thank you for showing up for me. That's so kind. And also to possibly some of the people on here who have emailed me already and said like, oh, I'm coming to this thing and I'd love to ask you a question first. I apologize. I know I haven't written you back yet. I am not the best at timely email responses. They all get responded to, but timeliness is not my gift when it comes to communication like that. So I will get you. I will see you. I see you. And I am grateful for you reaching out and grateful that you've given me that time already. I will get back to you and I promise it. But I thank you, Jennifer, for this gracious opportunity to share and to get feedback from, as I said briefly when we were on the call, right? People who I see as like so much more beyond and smarter and wiser and more experienced than I am, which is why I am excited to be in this program and programs that I choose, because it is the gold. It's the feedback from one another that allows me to unlearn, grow, be challenged. And so I am slightly obsessed with being surrounded by people that are like more than I am. And so I'm grateful for you all being here and to share with you. And then I'm excited for you to challenge me further so that we can do more together, because none of this happens in a vacuum. And on that, I will say that I pushed back a little bit on the title of of today's talk. I'm all about the isms. I will be in a future isms conversation any day with all of you, but I shared with Jennifer that I'm very uncomfortable um, titling anything that I am professing as the future of. And I share that because there's no way what I am presenting and what I will share with you. I made a deck for today that I just built out, but there's no way that I am the future of anything or what I am presenting is the future. It is collectively part of something much bigger than I could articulate. So I feel like I am addressing a very small niche of like an entire ecosystem. And I do think it's an important, very important part, but so are so many other parts of this space and specifically within filmmaking. I get very anxious about the idea of the future of as a title or a claim. So I share that as a like very strong disclaimer that I am researching a tiny aspect of independent film that I hope improves the greater, but it's just a part of something much bigger than me. So I share that as before I open my deck because it's part of, again, I am such a small part of something so much bigger. All right, I can share because we figured that out. So I just made this deck. I hope you guys like it. I also shared that it's a work in progress, and I have found that decks like this are a really great way for me to try to see what AI thinks of my space. So I have a few things in here where I have images that were created via prompts. So I don't claim them as perfect. They have not been proofed per se, but the idea is they give a general overview to share kind of from a generalization perspective. So this is where my research is. Go ahead.
Can I ask, do you want to take questions as you go or just at the end in the chat that I can sort of help facilitate later, or what do you
I
prefer?
am fine stopping along the way because maybe it adds value in that moment. But
Mhm.
if you feel them, because I may get chattery, right? I told Jennifer I can talk about this stuff all day long. So
So
forgive me.
feel free to throw questions in the chat. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll have more.
So yeah, if you see one, because I can't see the chat right now, I only see my slide, and then you all are like tiny, tiny.
Mhm.
Or just a few of you are tiny, tiny. So this is my current research, and it is in the proposal phase still, working with my committee to get feedback and advice on how to finalize the actual proposal. So I am not technically a candidate yet, right? I think that's how that works. You tell me, Jennifer. So I'm still proposing. I'm still a doctoral student with any of you who are also doctoral students. Um, and so this is my working title right now, Regenerative Relationships in Independent Filmmaking. I am exploring how filmmakers and film financiers define success for potential, purpose, and profit. You may find that I love alliteration. It's everywhere I go. I can't help it. So my guiding inquiry, the very focus of this research as I see it right now, and again, this is all a work in progress, right? So it could be refined and it continues to be tweaked, but the research is asking how independent filmmakers and film financiers might develop more regenerative relationships. So for my research, I have two stakeholder groups, one guiding inquiry. This is everything for me. And then how I'm framing it and what I'm really looking at in my exploration with this research is I see it as I am looking at potential, purpose, and profit, right? These three things are where I'm also deriving most of my literature review and where I have, based on feedback so far, and this is something it's not just here. I get this feedback all the time that I'm talking about too many things, right? So I'm trying to refine it very specifically. But I think these three things, how we refine them and how many frameworks I try to bring in will make it tighter. But for me, potential is about how we define success, right? So each of us have a definition of success for ourselves as individuals. And so when you're looking at groups of people, in this case, my two different stakeholder groups, how do they individually as humans define success? And I think this is really, really important to how we make sure they get everything they want out of this space. How do the creatives define success for their work and what they're working towards? You know, what is their North Star that they're working towards? And then how do financiers also define success? Because in previous research, as I will discuss in a little bit, I have some slides about myself in my previous research. The success metrics have been one of the greatest sort of like dividing aspects of whether or not individuals continue in this space or want to do more in this space. So to build regenerative relationships, I think it's incredibly important based on the research that we really understand what it is we're working towards. So then a lot of it we can, we can build backwards based on what is that goal. And so then the purpose is values. This is very largely values oriented research. Because again, you may have a North Star, but why are you working towards that? What is it about your values that are driving you towards that? And I talk to, a lot of different financiers, whether they're social impact or pure ROI and a myriad of things in between. What are their values? Because that helps define and helps me more deeply understand their success metrics. And then profitability. How are we defining profitability? Because there are a lot of different types of film support that don't look like what you might assume is profitability. And I can share, like, for example, a big trend in independent film financing in the kind of under $5 million space is corporate loss. And so that doesn't necessarily look like what we would traditionally think as profitability, but yet their profit model is based on, current taxation, viable models. And so a lot of corporations are funding films as a corporate loss, and that's a win for them. So then like, what is profitability and how are you defining it so that we can work backwards from that, knowing what the end goal was. So I'm looking at that in regards to like economic structures. And then my research, and this is where I started to ask AI to like make me a poster based on like some important documentaries that have, been influential in cultural conversations. So my research practice is relational, right? These are groups of people and the connections between them. It's values-based knowing. How are we defining our values? And then systems-oriented thinking. I love systems. I love systems thinking. I love systems framing. I love looking at different ways of seeing and then trying to understand how we can apply that to different aspects of our research. So that's very, very important to me. And I think kind of inextricably intertwined in all of the research that I am trying to put forward. And so then I started to share a little bit, like, these slides are a little bit more about me, right? Like why I do this work. I have a core belief that storytellers can change the world. And so my hope and my position is, how do I support those storytellers by effectively addressing systems to do just that? So my work has always been with filmmakers, but because I believe, they they work in a medium that has such incredible power. So I feel like I support the most powerful people in the world. Um, but it is their stories that give them that ability to do that great work. And I do believe it's incredibly important work. So I hope that I can be a part of systems change that helps them do just that. And so that fuels a lot of everything I do. This is like sort of my background. This is who I am and how I come to this work. It's also how I came to academic research. So I had been working in this space professionally for I don't know, at this point, like, I'd been professionally working in the space for maybe 15 years when I was experiencing enough like red flags in my industry that were making me question the space that I was devoted to. And now I love this space. I will support it immensely. And none of my work is about burning any houses down. This is all about, building ways to work together more effectively. But what I found in my work was that I was in spaces where the mission and the sort of the writing on the wall in the offices that I worked, right, was all discovery, new voices, original stories. And yet where I felt like I was in each of my positions, I felt like I was typing the same people's names in every year. And I say that with love, right? Like, these are all amazing individuals telling amazing stories, but it didn't feel representative of the space for which I was advocating, or the majority. So I went back to graduate school because I wanted to do better. I wanted to kind of challenge and unlearn how I was doing the work that I was doing. Why was I experiencing these red flags? And again, like, I can share stories upon story about how I was hoping for more in the spaces where I was. But I definitely saw that there were barriers, right? There were barriers to making that change possible, or, doing, let's say, more work, right? It just wasn't accessible, and it wasn't accessible to a lot of the creators that I was working with. Um, and so then that's how I came to this research. And I can share that when I was at those organizations, working, as, like as a staff member, I originally went back to graduate school. While I was still working there. And I remember having a conversation. Her name is Michelle Satter, and she's one of the founders of she's of Sundance and all of the artist support programs. So all of the programs that are actually supporting the storytellers. And she is very much seminal in all of independent filmmaker support programs, right? And I remember talking to her about my research very early on. And I feel like I have many of these stories where I'm like, I have an idea and I present it to the world, and the world like laughs at me and rolls their eyes. Um, so I was talking to Michelle, and I was saying, like, I want to support artists more effectively. And I'm pretty sure that 12 years ago she said, yeah, you need to research money. And I was like, no, Michelle, it's not about the money. It's about artists, and it's about what they need to say in the world. And it's like, how do we support them more effectively? And I'm pretty sure she just sat there and was like, yeah, go research money. And I was fully hesitant of this idea because it's just not, it wasn't in my like awareness really of like the importance of this relationship. I really didn't understand it from my perspective. I have a saying that my family has um, sort of branded me with, and that is, I have done so much with so little for so long. I now expect I can do absolutely nothing. I can do absolutely anything with absolutely nothing. And so I didn't understand why I had to research money. Um, I've lived on everyone's couches for so long. Anyone can do that, right? Um, and so I went back to graduate school originally to research and do case studies with filmmakers who had done all of the labs and fellowships, all of the development programs, Venice, Rotterdam, Berlinale. Like they had been cultivated to be the savviest storytellers and the strongest small business leaders of their original IP. And so I did this research with creators doing case studies of their experiences. And what it brought me to was a real understanding of the breakdown between the value of what they were developing and what they were ready to share and their worth in the industry. And so that then took me to like a business school and JM program looking at like IP development and like business and legal, because these storytellers were telling me that they had done everything. Like from my perspective, they were the next big thing, right? They were the next storyteller to tell the next most important story, but they didn't have any access to financing for their film. Quite differently, they actually were offered seats in writers' rooms for existing IP for, a major studio movie, or a franchise or something like that. Like that's sort of the pipeline was feeding into something different that wasn't what they were being cultivated and prepared to do in the world. And so I saw them as something incredibly valuable from my perspective, but my perspective was not aligned with the current financing or economics of film financing. So I then had to, do a lot more research. And then I worked at a studio for a while trying to build out workflows. And this took me to kind of my problem of practice of my first research, which was on valuation metrics. So I did research on valuation metrics of filmmakers, and that's kind of like what I originally did research. As I was advised, an EDD was a practitioner's doctorate. That's what I was told. So I was like, okay, so I'll get into that and I'll propose a model of what could work for financiers. And so I found myself doing this research and really, really enjoyed applying, what I was learning and what I knew from the filmmaker space of like, how do we value creators and what does that look like and how does it apply and translate over to the economics of film finance? And so I thought a practitioner's doctorate, present the research, share it with people. I thought that was going to just be like gangbusters, how I get into work doing applying it to independent filmmakers and getting them the support they needed. And sort of a general feedback I got, and again, just eye-opening. And again, another one of those moments where I'm just like way more ignorant than I realize I am. right, is I was presenting the research and I would get like, well, Breven, that's really interesting. Yeah, it might work. It's just not how we do things now. And I like my mind didn't understand because it was like these are all the things you say you want, right? Like you say you want diverse voices and you want original IP and you want to make more money. Like isn't this what you like you claim to be, your business model? And yet um it turns out, and again, foolishly, as many a thing, change isn't as popular as people, say that it is. Like it's not like in practice, they don't really want to do it. So, while I was in that experience and like finalizing my dissertation there, I came to CIIS very specifically because I felt I really needed to expand my articulation of things I was seeing in the space, and I needed help and refinement. And this is where I, tell Jennifer, yes, please, all the feedback. I want it because I want to make this accessible, right? I want this to be something, and I described very often that my cohorts and the amazing people that I have met through this university are so beyond me. I describe myself as very basic a lot of times. Like I feel like my research is like so simple compared to so many people that I speak to in this space. Like you all are doing work that are here in this program. Like you're doing work that's so beyond me. Like I feel like I read it and then it like takes me like a while to like fully understand it. And then I have to come back to it and I read it again. And then I get it. And I feel like my work is like very basic. I'm just trying to finance filmmakers. Like it's so simple. Um, and so I am here to try to build out, more ways to articulate the value of the storytellers who I believe are doing the great work. And so on that, back to the research, right? Is that this research is about relationships and economics, right? And so I feel like I try to articulate it here. And the research examines these interdependencies between creators and their financial supporters. And it's relational value alignment, it's systems thinking framework, and it's regenerative economics. So we need to be doing good business in entertainment so that we can put more money into entertainment. I believe all of the capital is out there based on my research. All of the potential support for storytellers is there. And I do work with in my work, in my research, I am talking to filmmakers and we're talking about projects. Scale is always something that people are, like where they fit into the model. And some people have all kinds of assumptions about, what size of films we're talking about here. But I talk with filmmakers who were talking about entire budgets of $100, or we're talking about budgets of $100 million and everything in between. So sort of size, I am both like content agnostic, I say, right? So it's not about a particular type of filmmaker. And it's also from a size perspective, right? I'm working with filmmakers who made their film for $100, or I'm talking to teams who are making a film for $100 million. And I've also consulted for literally nations that are building film funding models. And so then the size of those numbers is almost beyond me. Like I've consulted on nations that like I have literally no idea what types of monies those groups are putting into potential financing models. So, but specifically for this, right? These are qualitative interviews using reflexive thematic analysis across the two stakeholder groups, and I'm comparing the perspectives and their definitions and how they articulate what success looks like to them with genuine goals of building bridges between these two stakeholder groups in a way that is accessible, right? I want this to be something that we can do. So it is, there's definitely like an esoteric aspect of the thinking, but my hope and my heart lives in how do we make this something that's very accessible for people to do so that they can go out and either support the storytellers or be the storyteller who is supported to do the work that changes the world. And then my positionality is really important, obviously, as all of ours are, but to this research, because for me, I exist in both stakeholder groups as a human. So I am both a creative who has stories that are in some phase of support, and I am also, equity investing or philanthropically supporting filmmakers. And so these are just This one wasn't AI. This was just me. So this is just a couple of the titles of films that I have in the world of recent. Right. So like the middle film we premiered at Berlinale in February, which was really exciting for my filmmaker. And then to the left of that is a film that was the first Bangladeshi film ever to play at Slam Dance that we executive produced. And so these are just some of the films that I'm working on, but these are the ones that I had posters for of recent. There's like a dozen more that we are in some stage of production or post. But the idea is that I need to, in my research, be very clear and make a lot of notes and figure out how to articulate where I am, both emotionally and physically invested in the space and how I have done that. So that's something that I am going to get, you know, look to Jennifer and my committee about how do I make sure that I am being clear about what is coming from my person and my experience and what is me trying to understand somebody else's position. Um, and then my only note for all to share, I feel like, is I hope you are as excited about your research if you're in some stage of research as I am, because don't do research that you don't care about. That's my only note to both researchers and to filmmakers, right? Because you're going to live with it for so long, and it's going to be a relationship that you have with that work that you can't get away from. So make sure it's a relationship you want to be in. And so I say that, and I like couldn't be more excited about this work. Whenever I talk to people about it, I had a woman the other day, who was a friend who I've known for a very long time. And she looked at me, I hadn't seen her in like a decade. And she was like, she's like, you're happy. And I was like, yeah, because it's so true, right? Because I'm doing something that I so deeply care about. And so that feedback was beautiful because it's very true. Like doing this research makes me happy because I feel like I'm doing something that I am called to do. And so I hope that for everybody in their research and the work that they're doing, right? I want it to feed you in the same way that it feeds me. So that's what I have. That's where I am right now in, I'd say nascent stages, but I'm also 11 years into academic research. So
Hey, it's a never-ending
I put my
process.
email here. If anyone, you're welcome to email me. This is my personal email. Um, if you do have a question that comes to you later about this work, it's just my middle name at Gmail. I'm gonna stop sharing, but it's my middle name at Gmail if you have anything that you want to know about. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me. I'm really grateful to to be sharing this work because it really does. It means everything to me. Um, and and begin again because I believe the storytellers are going to change the world. So how do I in this moment, like a lot of times I have to tune out a lot of what's in the world to be able to stay focused. But then I am so fueled because it's my artists, it's the storytellers who are doing the work. And I do believe there's also financiers who care deeply, but don't necessarily understand our space and we don't understand their space. So how do we build it together?
I'm so excited. I know we talked when we first got here, and I'm so glad of where we are and continuing this journey. So I have a question, and
Please.
because I'm a filmmaker, I'm a founder of Women of Color Filmmakers Group, and on the board of a Young People's Filmmakers Group. Most of our money comes in the pipeline of nonprofits of what I call the begging system, and and so one of the things, and I was at a workshop with some of my mentors, are Julie Dash, Lele Sharon Larkin from the LA Rebellions. And one of the things at a workshop, Julie Dash talked about, and folks know she's an amazing filmmaker and scriptwriter. Daughters of the Dusk is her signature piece. But she talked about going to the studio head with a script that was about a young African American woman who was a genius in mathematics and did gaming and so on. And their response to her was, and this is maybe 10 years ago, but their response to her was, um, no one would believe that. So my question to you has to do with looking at sort of this system where I know, we make small films, we call them sort of run and gun. We have to buy equipment with the funding that we get. The funding is now getting smaller and drying up, and it's between a lot of folks. And so my question is, we don't even have access for the most part to this level of capital, and we're also talking about a lens with primarily Caucasians and males who are running these pots of money. And so how in your research, how does that translate into equity, or equity and justice for, I hate the word diverse these days, but a
Yeah.
multitude of conversations that are transformative for everyone, not just a few.
Yeah. Lois, thank you so much for, as you said, for being here together again, right? Thank you for that. And thank you for this question. I feel like it's a really, I will try to answer it as best I can from my position, right? One is that I think when I first started my previous research, which I feel like addresses it more, was I was genuinely trying to get buy-in from the existing system, right? And I think now I am much more comfortable sharing. I get booed out of a lot of rooms, Lois. That's like a way that I describe it. Like I describe it like I used to be selling, like, come on, isn't this what you want? This is everything you said you wanted. Isn't this what we're going to do moving forward? And then based on my experience, similarly, different, but similarly, was that I would just get a lot of like uh placating responses. Like they would take my call, right? Like, and I talk to a lot of executives in my research, like where they still take my call because they're looking where they can win as well. But I'm getting more and more comfortable in my truth, which is I don't think we need the existing system for the new models that we're proposing. And I think that's becoming more and more apparent, right? I mean, Jennifer, you were talking about this kind of just at the very beginning, is right. There are alternative economic models that are more exciting than the existing system, because I can share from most of those in those gatekeeping spaces is based on research they are taking like 2/3 of a production's budget for the system, for to have certain like executives on board and to keep the lights on at the studios, but it doesn't actually add value to the projects. So when I'm talking to filmmakers who have done works with these major studios, and only 1/3 of the and I'm speaking in a generalization in this moment, but like 1/3 of the budget actually went to the film and the product that goes into the world. I literally want to challenge the entire idea of that and flip it on its head and say, like, I'm talking to investors and I want them to win, because I want them to continue to support this space. So we need to be making sure that like 100%, in my opinion, and this is where I get booed out of a lot of rooms, right? 100% of the budget goes into the product that goes into the world so that it reaches its greatest success potential, right? And then we profit participate on the other side. But that's not the current model that exists at large. And so this is where many people benefit from the current system. A few people, but many people, enough people that it's really hard to get into. But yet I challenge the entire model of the current economic model of entertainment from the larger space, right? That model doesn't actually benefit my two stakeholder groups. And so this is where my research is focused on those two stakeholder groups, which don't really include the studio system anymore. Because based on my research presenting it to the existing system, not only, were they not interested, but I now understand more deeply, looking at numbers, why they're not interested, right? When you're taking 2/3 of the budget of a product before the product's even made, then like you have such a small pool left to see that to its greatest success. But then looking at other projects where, a smaller project where 100% of the budget went to the product, the profit participation on the other side is exponentially greater. So I want investors to be winning like that, right? I want the creators to be winning with them. So if my two stakeholder groups can win, right, based on their success, knowing that every success is different, right? But if those two stakeholder groups can win, we have something different that's exponentially greater than the current system.
And can I just say also that it's also my sister's a Emmy Award nominated set design or
Hmm.
set decorator, and in the production. But what I found is the exploitation because the money, the trickle down money was horrendous, so exploitive. I
Yeah.
mean, and not only financially but
Hmm.
also physically and in terms of their time and the quality of
Hmm.
life for those. And also, just to say, and thank you for that, is that without the money, people don't realize how long it takes to create
Hmm.
a project. I'm working on
Yeah.
a documentary now, little
Hmm.
pieces, and I'm in my fifth year of working on this
Yeah,
documentary.
absolutely.
And it's not, and it's not fair, and it's our time, and we want to share these conversations
Yeah.
with the environment, and we should have a
Yeah.
right to.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Um,
your work.
No, Lois, thank you so much. I shared with Jennifer in a text. So yesterday I met because you said Emmy, it maybe reminded me. So yesterday I met with one of my alumni of one of my programs. She's a 93-year-old now, Emmy winning documentarian. And she told me, I told Jennifer this, and when I left, I was sharing her with like where I am in my research, and she knows like she is much an inspiration to why I do this work, right? Because she's one of the storytellers that I've seen her in a room where her work has changed the world for multiple people in that space, right? Of different generations. And her work like was so meaningful. And she told me that after I was telling her about my research that she cried because she said like it's gonna like if I can articulate this well enough, like it could matter to storytellers, and she is one of them, right? And she has struggled so much with the financing of her projects, as so many of my filmmakers are, right? The institutional knowledge loss is so great in entertainment, in independent filmmaking. We lose creators. I have so many stories of so many creators who no longer make films because this space is completely inequitable, right? And so my heart and my purpose and passion behind this is that I need to build better systems so those creators can do that work because we're losing them, and I see it. I'm tracking them, and they can't stay. They can't keep making films.
And in a 30-year, just the last thing, in a 30-year career, union career, my sister just left because in 30 years she was one of three union people of color.
Yeah.
And 30 years later, she's one person left,
Yeah.
and she's one of three people. So there's also the inherent racism that we don't want to talk about. And there's one production designer, Wynn Thomas, from Philadelphia, in
Yeah.
working out there. So those are important
Yeah.
because they separate,
Mhm.
because people of color tend to hire people of color in their, because that's one place where we can have work. So
Yes.
thank you for your work, and I will shut up now.
No, Lois, thank you so much. Thank you for the continued conversation and the allyship as we do this work together here in this program. Jackie, I see your hand.
Questions, Lou? And I see also before Jack, someone had posted a great question in the
Oh,
chat.
great.
Ruby Jimenez, if you're still there, if you wanted to ask it out loud. Or I could read it out. So the question is, could you speak more about what you talked about in terms of value alignment, and the profit metric? And do you have any examples of those?
And again, so value metrics for me, I have a quick little story that I share often, and it goes back to institutional knowledge loss as well. And so there was a startup, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. It's still a company around. It's pay to play like most things in my space. Um, and so they were building something that I thought was really interesting from like a technology perspective, from a values-based perspective. They were building something that basically anyone could use. And when they started it, it wasn't necessarily pay to play. It was like share what you're doing, and we can potentially find you the right alignment of financial support. And so I was really excited about what they were building from a technology perspective, and an accessibility perspective, because this might be equitable. And so I reached out to them, and I was pitching them my research for a while. And I was like, trying to tell them that, I think what you're doing is amazing, but I think you're missing a few metrics that might allow more people into the room who have something of value and who would be worth investment. And so I invited one of their I invited their CFO to come to like a fancy dinner at like one of the fancy orgs I was working at. And so they they took me up on the dinner, and I think they were mostly just looking around the room for more, like fancier people to talk to. But across from us sat a filmmaker. And this filmmaker shared, and so this was an event, the event was taking place during Sundance. And this filmmaker was sharing that he had had 5 short films at Sundance premiere 5 years in a row. And I was like, wait, tell me more, buddy, because this is very interesting and very unique. And so I'm sitting here with this CFO, and I'm like, do you hear who this human is who has stories to tell? Clearly, the tastemakers, right, and gatekeepers are programming him, giving him space and runway because they believe his stories matter, right? They believe his original voice and his stories and his artistic vision, it matters. They're giving him space. So my note to this CFO was like, if you say you have all of these investors, there must be one investor in your wheelhouse who is interested in like a Sundance carpet. Like that's a valuable thing, right? I had somebody willing to like throw down 250 just recently to be like, I want to be a name on a carpet, right? Like I want to be one of those people. And so this financier, we're talking to the filmmaker, and the filmmaker is trying to raise $300,000 for his first independent feature film. Now, it's a very reasonable price point based on his track record, right? So I'm telling the CFO, like, this is a valuable investment for someone in your portfolio who might be interested in some actual carpets, right? Like again, there are no guarantees, but there's a high likelihood that programmers are interested in his work. Fund this filmmaker. The filmmaker no longer makes films. And so he's just another one for me that fuels why I do this work, because there was a creator whose voice matters, who's making interesting, culturally relevant work that could move into the like ROI space, like a profitability space. But right now he's making something that could get a lot of people what they do want, which is, social capital and walking a carpet, something like that. And so here was someone who had a very reasonable price point, and I could see the value metrics in the work that this creator had done, right? Their hustle mattered to their potential value from an investment standpoint. But yet the CFO said, yeah, he'll never show up on our metrics. And so I'm saying, I believe your metrics are off, right? Like you need to expand your metrics to include people that are doing the work, right? I see so much happening in my space where filmmakers matter, much like the case studies I was doing with the artists who had done as many as 15 years of fellowships, labs, development programs that they're paying for out of pocket to become a savvier storyteller and a stronger small business leader. Because as I see it, the original IP that filmmakers are making is very much a small business, right? So if we look at it from like a venture capital perspective, we need to be supporting those creators, right? Based on their work and based on the small businesses that they have led. I have a example that I share often where I was in a meeting for my research at Netflix, and this was a long time ago, but they said, oh yeah, most of our first-time feature filmmakers fail when we give them $10 million. I'm sorry, but what are you doing giving a first-time business person, right, a creative who is also a business person because they have to be, right, $10 million? Like you're setting them up to fail. You're setting creatives up to fail when you don't consider the work that they have done previously to go into what they're making next. So like scaffolded financing models are needed in our space to be setting people up for success. So, whereas I was hoping to help this, one person raise $300,000 for their first time feature when they have already built a runway. And then Netflix is like, well, telling me that first time entrepreneurs at $10 million aren't working out. Yeah, no kidding. Like it's a crazy perspective from my opinion based on my research, right? Which is all I have.
Really, really like what you're doing. I've been on my journey for quite a long time. And I too believe that stories can change the world. Like the whole philosophy, I'm a PCC student. My work is representative of that, but I'm put in a story so people can, like the environment. If I make uh, some of the elements people, you can come to love them as opposed to just water, just fire. So I've had a very interesting journey. I actually turned down a really, 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 really big deal because they just wanted to work and didn't really want to pay me. They just wanted to pay me just as the writer. And I'm like, wow, you know, and so I didn't go for it. And some people think I'm kind of nuts for that, but I don't. So what my attorney actually had me do is to write a darn book. I wasn't happy about it. Took like 4 or 5 meetings to me to even agree. Okay, you want me to turn my script into a book? And she said to protect my intellectual property because, it's some interest in my film. So I just finished the book and now getting ready to release the book. But it's really based on this film. So and I've done like I did like my comps and I had a line producer do my budget, learned a whole lot. Like for instance, I found one guy and he only did up to like 5 million, and my film is a little bit higher. And so I didn't know you had to have a line producer that deals with a certain budget, that. And so anyway, it's been a journey, but would really like to stay in touch and learn more as I keep going in this process to kind of see what happens. I value my work too much to just kind of sell it short because I really believe and hope that it will help our world, you know, and I just want to say that.
Jackie, thank you so much for what you're doing. I don't even know your story yet, but I'm excited for you. And also, I know it took a lot of meetings. Trust me, I've also been the person that's looked back and been like, how many times did somebody tell me to do that? And I should have done it from the beginning. But yeah, you should write the book. I'm glad you're writing the book. Because it is important. And I also like I just again I want you to be seen for all of the value, right, that it is in writing the book, or for some people, it's a comic book or a comic strip or whatever it is. However, you can expand your IP ownership over your stories and your storytelling. I absolutely encourage you to do that as well, because those are also like values within the larger marketplace that ensure that it's yours and protect
Right.
you as well as potentially bring you more revenue streams.
So I just want to just share a tiny bit about the proposal, which I'm so excited about. And I guess my question I want to ask now is, where's your cutting edge with this now? Do you have any current thoughts you want to share about how this is morphing? Or I know you're on it. It's really ready in many ways, and you're just working on some last adjustments. And I wonder if you want to talk at all about those adjustments, or if you have questions for the audience, about the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Um, I the adjustments are ever, right? Like always, ever. Yes. Agreed. To try to make it better, right? So I welcome any feedback of either places that I didn't make sense, right? Like if it isn't clear, because I think I can talk about it like from too many perspectives sometimes, because I see so many frameworks and disciplines and industries that I think are completely applicable. And can't you see the parallels or the through line, right? But I welcome any feedback to what you see. For example, Lois, when you were talking, I was just like, oh my gosh, you talked about the trickle down, and I was like, that's why the word waterfall is used, because a waterfall sounds like it's powerful at the bottom, but it's not. So I was like, that's so interesting that as a language choice, the funding is often referred to as a waterfall, as if somehow it's like actually more powerful at the bottom when it's nobody at the bottom makes any money. So I was just like, oh, what a trick word that they're using. Interesting.
I think, one of the comments from one of your committee members was really helpful around how powerful and how well it's working now to be looking to be bringing together pieces that other people haven't brought together the way you are. Really, really important lenses, the relational lens, value-based, system-oriented lens. And that's something you've been steeped in for a long time, these lenses.
Yeah.
So I think it comes naturally to you.
Mm-hmm.
And also the way that independent film is also talked about in all these different categories, and you're really looking at one big relational field of what makes for independent film. So I think that's already a really super strong framing.
Thank you.
And I wonder
Thank you so
whether
much. I appreciate that.
yeah, I mean, it seems like the question about the new talent and the financiers is so central and so strong. And so a lot of what the committee has been saying is just making that really precise and tractable and specific so that because it's funny because oftentimes the strength of a proposal for a work or a book also um, brings forth some of the weaknesses, or that they're interconnected in a way. And in a way, having the one relational field is really powerful. But then how do you talk about that in a really clear way where you're focusing enough to say something really tractable and know that the kind of stakeholders and participants that you're bringing in will say something really tractable about that. And I think you're so experienced at this that this comes naturally to you. It's just a matter of kind of crunching down, thinking about all the different possibilities towards what's really going to work best. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about that, and if not, we can talk about it again an hour later.
Yeah, it has to do a lot with sharing it, right? Sharing it and getting feedback, because in my head, a lot of times something makes sense, but then it doesn't translate. And so I think being open, my words to myself to, just being open to getting that feedback and it being like, well, that's not really tracking, is like adding value. Speaking of values, right? There may be things I'm talking about that aren't actually adding value to my intention for the research, right? And my intention for the research is to build regenerative relationships because I believe the importance of these relationships based on years of research. So now I need to build out focusing on this relational aspect, the bridge between those two, but it is, like you said, like it's based on previous research too, right? That I'm expanding on, but articulating also in its own world, right? This research has to live by itself as well. So it has to both articulate itself and, bring in enough existing literature and to show that this is coming from somewhere that also exists with data and information based on like that validates it.
Yeah, well, you said that so clearly, the focus on the relationships. And I think a lot of the other pieces that are in there can support that. And so sometimes, very often, that's another way people parse things is when you state your core intention and aim so forcefully, then the other parts tend towards supporting that, and that will be clearer and clearer as you're thinking about it.
So you oriented the lecture a little bit for me. And so I think in terms of feedback from myself, from what I've heard, and maybe some clarity needs to be included, was I think when we talk about regenerative sort of economies and relationship building, I think sometimes we're also at loss of script and how we're actually having the conversations to prove ourselves. And this kind of aligns with the question that I kind of posed in the chat. I feel like sometimes as an emerging filmmaker, as someone of color, as a woman, like it's always so difficult to not only just find those spaces in which people want to listen to you, but also having the right words to say the right things at the right time. And a lot of that has to do with, right, finding your research, knowing how to connect with people, having people skills, right? Like, so all of that is like your personality and sort of how you present yourself, right? But another part of it is, I think, is just knowing the grammar and the language. And a lot of it is this business language too, which I feel like I don't have experience with. I just got out of my cinematography class. I'm trying to become a first AC, so I'm like trying to do the right things from an academic standpoint, because as a first gen also, I don't have anyone who can help me sort of lead the way, right? And so, Breven, I'm curious, what would be some of those conversations and what are those scripts that you think people should be sort of including in maybe their grant proposals, including in funding propositions or in conversations for people like me?
So one, I hear you, right, Manu? I hear you on how complicated it is. And I think this is why I continue to do the research because, for example, in your question, like there simply isn't, that I am aware of, a linear path to present a certain thing or even to a certain human or to a certain company, and then somehow you move into this next step. Like none of this work is linear. And that's one of the reasons it is so inequitable, right? Because you can, like in other industries, you like get a certain degree or level of whatever, you know, my partner is an engineer, right? And so there's like very trackable, like you're this role and then you're this title and then you're this title, and there's like certain credentials that you just do and then you're the next title. And our space doesn't have that, right? And the myth of meritocracy that lives in the entertainment industry, that somehow you get discovered and you just like get funded and then this is what it takes, right? Is wildly fueled by predatory practice. And again, I will, like, a lot of this is, you know, my opinions, and it's all I have based on my experience. But one of the things I share, like, to frame this, is one of the reasons I say I don't have a traditional job is because the work that has been offered to me, especially since I started my research by like random headhunter calls you and says like, oh, we see what you've done. We think you'd be great for X, Y, and Z, right? Which is a bad example to use because that's actually a real entertainment company. But so that you get sort of headhunted, and then what I would ask is like, what's your business model, right? Like, what are you doing that also makes you think that I'm the right person for you? And what was interesting when this first started happening was I would find that headhunters wouldn't know what the business model was for the company for which they were serving. Fascinating to me. Or they would tell it back to me. And again, speaking in a gross generalization, again, basically the way I define it is that companies are selling, especially startups, are selling picks and axes to filmmakers for them to go and mine their own gold with no vested interest on whether or not they find anything. So it doesn't matter to them if you're successful based on their business model. Their business model is to sell you stuff, right? And so this is what people were like, oh, you understand independent creators, right? So we have something we're trying to sell them. So they want to sell you something that's going to, honestly, the way marketing is right now, like if you swipe across what they're marketing, it's brilliant, right? It's a brilliant marketing plan. And so I used to say the picks and axes sort of analogy story. And now I say they're selling pet rocks, right? Because that was a brilliant marketing plan. That's all it was. It was a brilliant marketing plan to show you what the pet rock could do, right? This is solving the world. This is the future of, right? The pet rock was the future of. And they've solved everything. They've solved your financing. They've solved your production. They've streamlined the back end for paperwork and legal. All you have to do is pay here and buy the thing they're selling. And then somehow that's going to solve everything. When in reality, in practice, you still have to do everything, right? Like you bought a thing, and the way I'd see it is like you now hold a pet rock that's beautiful. It had an incredible marketing plan, but it doesn't actually do any of the work for you to help you as a filmmaker. So I don't sell widgets. And my entire business model for my work is only profit participation. And so, I'll get a email or whatever from a filmmaker that's like, if you could just help us raise X, we can give you X, but I cannot accept it ethically based on my work, because my entire sort of mission is to prove that profit participation can be exponentially more profitable than taking a cut from a filmmaker. So all of the films that I work on are only profit participation. And I say that knowing that most films do not make money, right? Full transparency. Most films don't make money. But I believe a different economic model, even if we're only using profit participation, the returns are going to be exponential. It's just not the current model. And so I believe in it literally with my person. So no, I don't make much money at all right now because I'm playing a very long game to prove that there's a different way to do things. And I know that doesn't completely answer your question. And if anything, it just shares like how inequitable our space is. But I hope to be a part of the continued conversation with you. And I also want you to leverage your Fulbright and anything else you can leverage to continue to get support in all of the ways that you possibly can. And I do think more and more support spaces continue to open. And a lot of them are for, specific groups, specific types of filmmakers. So, and I believe that continues to grow because, even that, it's been references like cottage-based support, right? Those cottage industry support it does make a difference. It does not change systems wide based on the research, right? They're band-aids in a way, but they do help filmmakers today. So that is helpful in this moment. But I also I want real systems change also.
So, Breven, oops,
Mhm.
this is my internet connection just got unstable for a split second, but I want to invite Ruby's last question, and then we're a couple minutes over. But Ruby, please jump in, and then Breven, if you have any closing words or anything you want to share, that's great too.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't mean to keep you. Well, I was just I wanted to mirror a little bit what Manu said, which is like um, first of all, I really appreciate your work because it sounds like it's also influencing the investors. And
Mm.
that is really kind of where the work, in my opinion, needs to be done because we're all out here creating and going into our, we're like building skateboards and ramps and doing all with we're duct taping our lives together and starving here just to like make films. And so it would be great if that part gets taken care of. But I'm wondering and hoping that there's an element of your work that also makes the sort of accessibility to, say, a grad student or an early filmmaker. I also fell into filmmaking accidentally and then ended up going back to grad school for it. But I did want to just ask one last question, which is, are there pathways or streams of revenue or funding sources that aren't necessarily grant based? Because I've found in my own work, I'm a single mom and I also have 3 other jobs that I'm doing. And so like it's the grant writing process and the bureaucracy around the grant writing can be so thick that it then becomes another part-time job. And so I'm wondering, are there liaisoning organizations that actually do this type of work, even for a fee? The middlemanning between like repping your film to the funder.
Yeah. That's a really great question. I've never had success grant writing. So I lean on anyone in this room who does know that space more than I do. But for me, it would be someone like I would outsource, right, to get help with grant writing because I do know individuals who do that as for work. And so I would lean into that if it were me trying to do grants because I have 4 children and I get it. It's a lot. But as far as like financing, I feel like that this is where it's like it's just not linear, right? There's not a copy and paste. And the greatest success I have tracked for filmmakers based on the research is individual distribution strategies, right? So the ones who have been able to connect to the audience for their project, right? So I have a good friend filmmaker who just had a first responder film, and connecting to that community was how the film became so incredibly successful. So, and then I have tracked some recent genre films that have done very similar things where they've just connected with the audience for their particular project. And that can be from development, not just the exhibition side, not just in the recruitment side, but actually from the development of the project. So connecting to the community for whom your story is serving, or at least that you're aware they're serving. You might be serving so many more people that you don't even know. But if you can identify the community and the future audience for your production, I highly encourage you to start tracking those communities and connecting with them however best you can, because then those might be your greatest advocates and supporters for the film moving forward, right? Like they might be exactly who's going to support the project, not just the organizations, but the individuals for that community. And so I think that's been some of the greatest success stories that I have recently found is that and that's not just like in the last 11 years of academic research, right? The success stories have come from the people who identify who the audience for their project will be in many cases before the project is made.
Any last words for us, Breven? And we'll continue the conversation soon.
I know there were questions here that I didn't get, so please feel free to email me, be encouraged to email me, and also thank you for your grace in advance for me taking a minute to get back to you. But I will, and I look forward to the conversations. And I just want to say thank you so much for all of that you have given me. I genuinely hope that my work is servant leader led in the sense that like for my industry and for my space and for the creators for whom I serve. I even for my own, I have had a festival for 17 years. And even for my own festival, I surprised my filmmakers this past year, told them it's a fellowship now. It's not a festival anymore. Because my idea was I can't serve them in the way I would hope to, like in an exhibition space for 10 days. Instead, I'm saying that I need 18 months from you to to build a relationship and to know who you are and to know what your story is and to what you want to do next. So I've sort of expanded that in me clarifying my offerings. But then I was telling somebody about it and they're like, yeah, nothing's changed. That's what you've always been doing. So here I am thinking I'm moving out and apparently I'm on the same mission of always. So I thank you all so much for giving me this space and time to share. And I hope that I can serve all of my storytellers well. I hope that I can add value to what you do moving forward because I believe in you and I believe in the work that you are creating. So my hope is to add value to that.
Breven, I just want to say it's so inspiring when you talk. So often you are evoking so powerfully the very lenses that you're advocating for and utilizing. When you talk in this last bit, I just hear ringing through that it's values-based, relational, and that you're such a deep systems thinker and that you really organize and conceptualize your research that way. So that's a great sign for research, when who we are authentically matches up with the vision we have, matches with the theory and the framework and the methods that we're using, and it certainly does here. So anyway,
thank you all. I'm grateful. I am so grateful. I'm grateful for all of you and for this, and I hope for more. That's what I hope for.
Wonderful audience today. It was great to have people so engaged and come to our Futurisms Salon. Thank you, Breven.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all. Thank you so much.